On this sunny day, the waiting time outside the Dongan High School building dragged on very slowly. Two men in brown suits with badges were talking, and the shorter one with glasses told his smiling companion that he had finished quickly and then just sat there and got bored. Some noise attracted the attention of both of them. Bulky armored vehicles drove down the street, and people were sitting in their backs. They were young guys in expensive suits. The young girls watching them loudly admired these young men. "These aren't even hunters," one of the men in brown said to another, "but simply students from a specialized school." The second guy dismissively suggested that his interlocutor pay attention to the logo that belonged to the School of Heroes. Many years ago, it all started suddenly, without any warning, and people on the street looked in horror at the crimson sky. Many winged dragons descended to Earth. The monsters were larger than a skyscraper, and they penetrated human cities, scattering sparks of flame around them. The people of the cities looked at the monsters but did not even try to run away. According to scientific facts that were discovered later, there was a world similar to Earth in outer space. But because of the disaster that happened there, that whole world fell apart. The flaming debris fell to Earth and began to merge with the environment all over the planet. The phenomenon was called the merger, and the laws of nature of another world began to operate on Earth, and monsters appeared. The Earth changed, and monsters took control of approximately 17% of the Earth's surface. These areas were called the dungeons. A young man in a military uniform and a bulletproof vest watched as monsters killed people. The creature, only partly resembling a man but much larger, grabbed its victim by the head. This monster was called the Horned Horror. The stronger the creature was, the more horns it had. The monster looked at the city engulfed in flames. A guy in a military uniform hid from him behind a ledge of the wall. With a furious growl, the monster rushed towards him, sensing his presence. The guy took a machine gun and started shooting at the approaching enemy. The monster ran very fast, and its eyes glowed brightly. He hit the man, and the blow was so strong that blood came out of the victim's mouth. The next blow threw him back several steps. The man crashed into the wall and made a hole in it. The monster stood above him, and even his outstanding human abilities were not enough to resist these unknown guests. The monster crouched over its victim and let out a growl. But fortunately, the invasion from another world brought with it not only cataclysms, and the just helpless guy suddenly rose up and attacked the enemy with unexpected power. The innate limitations of humans and the limitations of potential inherent in the nature of the Earth no longer worked. The glow enveloped the man's figure, and now he had enough strength to hold the Horned Horror's fist with his own bare hand. The monster did not give up, and the fight continued. People changed and began to possess abilities that were previously inaccessible to them, as if they had thrown off the chains that had always bound them. A man could grab a monster several times larger than himself and throw it to the ground. The guy in military uniform used the ability that suddenly appeared in him to destroy the enemy. It was a victory, but the winner did not immediately realize it, looking at the defeated enemy. He looked in amazement at his own hands, enveloped in the glow of new strength. All Earthlings developed abilities, but each had their own skill, and those who stood out from the rest through training learned to use their full potential. A black sun rose over the ruined cities, and armies of monsters advanced on human territory. Now the people had something to oppose them with. They formed elite troops. Those who returned the dungeon zone to the people became known as hunters. Hunters fought monsters, dedicating their entire lives to this. The age of dungeons and hunters has arrived on Earth. People began to defeat the enemy, which had previously seemed too powerful. The whole world shook from their achievements and power. Before the end of a single generation, schools were founded in which future hunters were educated. The best school for teenagers, as well as an educational institution that had been producing successful hunters for 25 years, was Hero High School. Young people all over the world were eager to get into it. On a clear, sunny day, people in the city that had not been destroyed were discussing the students of the School of Heroes taking the exam in the dungeon. One man asked another what would happen if they died inside, but the second replied that they must be confident in their abilities if they were able to get in. Joyful exclamations again attracted the attention of the interlocutors. The group of girls continued to noisily admire, having noticed some particularly attractive young man. It was a fair-haired half-elf boy. The girls said it was on a completely different level. One of the guys watching them asked who it was, and the other replied that the half-elf was often shown on TV. His name was Choi Diav. His father was a famous hunter, his mother was an elf, and he himself was predicted to have a career as a hunter in the top 5 within 5 years of graduating from high school. Choi Dia was now 17 years old and a first-year student at the Hero School, having made 14 trips to the dungeons. The observer was surprised that the girls admired this young man so much, because he was not some kind of superstar. His interlocutor called him Cha Ryung and remembered that he had a part-time job today, adding that Lee Yun-jin invited her friends to karaoke. Cha Ryung looked at his phone screen and wished his friends to have fun without him. The friends suggested that Cha Ryung might be able to skip his errands today because the exams were over, but the other person hit him, causing him to fall. Cha Ryung said that they would see each other next week and headed away. One of the remaining boys told the one lying on the ground to think first and then speak. Everyone knew that Cha Ryung had a special situation. He was taking care of a seriously ill loved one. At this time, Cha Ryung was walking down the street, reading the notifications on his phone. One said that he had not paid his hospital bills for 2 months. The second said that an order had come in and he needed to come to work. Choi Diav, with his eyes closed in satisfaction, waved his hand to the girls greeting him. His attention was drawn to the silhouette of Cha Ryung walking away down the street. Choi Diav's friend asked what happened, what had upset him about that guy. But Choi Diav replied that he had just imagined something. Cha Ryung thought that he really didn't want to work today. He went down into the underground passage and crawled under the striped tape prohibiting passage. "Ah, it's you," Cha Ryung heard. "Say hello to our customer." 3 people were waiting for Cha Ryung in the passageway, broker Im Jae-hwan, and 2 strangers, one short and bald, the other huge and heavily muscled. Cha Ryung started to say words of greeting, but was rudely interrupted. The bald man furiously accused Im Jae-hwan of making fun of him. He needed the most capable person. But the broker objected that he invited the most capable one. The bald man loomed over Im Jae-hwan menacingly and called him a beast, and also said that he did not come here to do charity work. He ordered to remove Cha Ryung from here and bring a normal man. Cha Ryung watched the squabble. The bald man promised that if his demands were not met, he would make both of his interlocutors disabled right there. Cha Ryung intervened and asked the second stranger, the broad-shouldered one, if he was the hunter. But he quickly guessed that the broad-shouldered one used to be a hunter, but now he is no longer one, and works for the bald one, whom Cha Ryung called unfinished. The bald man stopped making a fuss and asked what the freak said. Broad-shouldered replied that he saw no point in talking. He just needed to break this impudent man's legs and arms, and he himself would understand where he was wrong. Im Jae-hwan continued to smoke silently, while the strangers tried to force Cha Ryung to apologize by threatening him with violence and calling him names. Cha Ryung responded that he didn't know how to do it. He rolled up the sleeves of his jacket, and a bluish glow formed around his figure. What is dungeon smuggling in simple terms? The hunter's job is to clear the dungeons of any dangerous creatures that may be encountered there. If they successfully destroy the monsters, they receive a large reward. But before these treasures are brought out into the open, they need to be tested. After all, among them there are treasures that possess enormous power. If they are left outside without proper permission, they could be used for dangerous purposes. Therefore, such treasures must be checked and registered by the Hunters Association. They are also subject to a corresponding tax. There are those who break this rule. They make an agreement with the hunters who do not want to pay high taxes. These criminals are secretly carrying out the treasures of the dungeons. If they are not caught, chaos may reign in society. The advertisement calling for such offenders to be reported to the Hunters Association was known to everyone in the world. Im Jae-hwan took out another cigarette from the pack. The bald man looked questioningly at the broker. He asked if he really would not interfere. Cha Ryung and his opponent, the tall, broad-shouldered Lee Pil-gyu, stood opposite each other, ready to begin the fight. Im Jae-hwan asked the bald man if he was scared now, but the customer objected that he was not the one who should be scared, since his fighter was very irritable. Lee Pil-gyu quit the hunters not because of an injury back in the day, but because of a beating from a colleague, and now his bosses have had to clean up corpses more than once. Cha Ryung said that beating up a coworker is serious, and Lee Pil-gyu is the real criminal, but it's not Cha Ryung's place to say such things about others. Lee Pil-gyu replied that he killed a pathetic person who was in his way. It was like getting rid of trash. Cha Ryung looked at his opponent thoughtfully. Then the guy suddenly smiled and said that now he would know what it meant to get rid of trash. Cha Ryung suggested that Lee Pil-gyu had committed the crime on purpose to get his license revoked, and Im Jae-hwan chuckled, thinking that the guy was truly crazy. Lee Pil-gyu's fist almost hit Cha Ryung's face as he continued to speak mockingly. It was a blow of incredible force, capable of taking off a head in one go. He didn't even touch Cha Ryung, and he said that his opponent didn't know how to attack. Lee Pil-gyu instantly became furious, but Cha Ryung remained calm. He said he would also give a light blow. Cha Ryung swung his arm and kicked Lee Pil-gyu in the base of the neck. Cha Ryung's face was filled with a mocking expression, while his opponent rolled his eyes in pain. The bald customer looked at what was happening in shock, but Im said that he warned that he would bring the most capable guy. Charyung retreated from the enemy, a glow of energy emanating from him. He said that looking at Lee Pil-gyu's appearance, he thought he would be tougher. Lee Pil-gyu didn't understand what had happened because there was a skinny youth standing in front of him. But the reflexes of this boy and the force of the blow that Pil-gyu missed impressed the former hunter. They pointed out that Lee Pil-gyu was facing a real professional. Im Jae-hwan told the customer that he had finally begun to understand something, and that Charyung was not someone who could be easily defeated in a fight. "He fights well," said the bald man, "but there was a time when Pil-gyu could do a lot." Im Jae-hwan replied that he had a rough idea of what it was like before. In the past, Lee Pil-gyu was one of those people called tanks. In response to the customer's surprised look, Im Jae-hwan explained that he had good intuition. Lee Pil-gyu told his opponent that he might know a few tricks, but that didn't stop him from being just some smuggler. Energy flowed from Lee Pil-gyu's body, reminiscent of electricity. After the merger, humans acquired skills that went beyond their boundaries. People have different shapes and abilities, so these skills also differ. The same applies to hunters. They are trained according to their talent, and each one plays his own role. Charyung looked at Lee Pil-gyu in amazement. Among the hunters there were so-called tanks, a specialization that protects team members from the dangers of the dungeon. They walked ahead, facing the monsters firsthand. Their bodies were so trained that bullets were not a threat to them. The best of the tanks were not afraid even of hits from rockets of any power. Charyung watched his opponent's transformation and recognized him as Tank. He entered the battle and attacked Lee Pil-gyu. The customer was shocked and speechless as he watched this fight. He tripped and almost fell, but Im Jae-hwan caught him. Im Jae-hwan muttered that what was happening was just hooliganism. Charyung had trashed his work area. Lee Pil-gyu delivered devastating blows, but Charyung deftly dodged them. Lee Pil-gyu's fist broke through the wall and he asked Charyung what was wrong, why he didn't show his abilities anymore. Charyung replied that he was simply not a fool and had no plans to jump into the trap set for him. Im Jae-hwan patted the customer on the shoulder and noted the good level of his fighter. Lee Pil-gyu's physical strength after transformation was comparable to an average truck. If it hit him, all his bones could be crushed. Im Jae-hwan shouted at Charyung to finish faster. He said that if Lee Pil-gyu smashed anything else, he would cut Charyung's salary. Lee Pil-gyu approached Charyung and said that Im Jae-hwan still didn't understand what was going on. Lee Pil-gyu told Charyung to admit it himself that he wasn't qualified to fight against a professional, but the guy just chuckled that it wouldn't be bad. Charyung picked up a long beam. He looked at the simple weapon and said he thought it would be enough. Due to their superior durability and agility, tanks were considered simply invincible. Charyung still didn't try to attack the enemy. He thought that everyone has their own weaknesses and enemies. Im Jae-hwan noted with certainty that this was the end. Two fighters radiating energy clashed in close combat. Charyung thought about those who were able to concentrate enormous destructive power into one point. The fighters dealt blow after blow to each other. Sparks flew for many steps around. After one successful hit, Lee Pil-gyu had blood pouring out of his mouth. The huge tank fell to the floor, and a very small guy stood above it unharmed. Lee Pil-gyu said, without getting up, that he wanted to know where Charyung learned this spinning technique. Charyung replied that he thought he had no idea about any techniques, but he understood that Lee Pil-gyu could actually see her before. Charyung thought about another warrior of great power who possessed this technique. This hunter was his father. When Charyung was just a child, his father was the best hunter. Little Charyung carefully crept out of the house to watch his father practice in the yard. This man's name was Yu Seong. When he was young, he was a soldier who fought monsters. Yu Seong was one of the first to discover that he had unusual abilities that allowed him to win these battles. He was the one who led the people into this difficult battle. This man was from the first generation of heroes who became the first hunters. Yu Seong lived through the worst of times, but for those born much later, he became a legend who will forever be etched into history. After all, for the hunters themselves, those times were hell. He was the only one who survived from Yu Seong's squad. There wasn't enough information yet about what the dungeons were. Monsters that don't seem to be the most dangerous in the modern world were comparable to an unknown disaster for the hunters of that time. They didn't necessarily look like humans. Some resembled giant worms with toothy mouths. People often ran away when they saw such a monster. Those who overcame fear found ways to deal with it. They found weapons suitable for killing monsters. In the dungeons, special alloys were used that were resistant to corrosion. Yu Seong was one of those who stood in the way of the unknown enemy. It was a very hard life. It required special courage to go into a hopeless attack. The first generation of hunters risked their lives using trial and error. The group that found Yu Seong after the fight with the giant worm consisted of 3 people. They were amazed by what they saw. The fighter sat next to the defeated monster, all alone. Those of the first generation who survived gained experience and achievements. They did it for the sake of future generations. In the end, they became heroes, like Dragon Slayer Yu Seong. This nickname was given to the one who was the first among people to kill a dragon. He was the best among the hunters in Asia in this world. Charyung respected and envied his father more than anyone else. He firmly believed that his father was invincible until he spied on him training. He saw the mighty warrior spitting out blood after coughing. Little Charyung ran to his father, afraid for him. Yu Seong raised his hand in warning, stopping his son. The cause of the Dragon Slayer's illness turned out to be poison. Charyung looked at his father and cried bitterly. While hunting in the dungeons, Yu Seong was poisoned and there was no way to cure him. The illness left him bedridden. He tried to overcome this difficulty. His physical condition had reached its limit after all these years. He was very exhausted. In this situation, even his colleagues, for whom Yu Seong had risked his life more than once, betrayed him. They took advantage of his illness and appropriated his achievements and property. Yu Seong's physical and mental suffering continued for several years. As time passed, the world began to forget the name of Dragon Slayer Yu Seong. It was no longer possible to see that image of a hero in him. He lost everything he had, suffered from an unknown disease, and was now just a former hunter, forgotten by everyone. Charyung stood over his fallen opponent. He never forgot who his father once was. Charyung didn't explain this to Lee Pil-gyu. He threw away the beam with which he had struck him and walked away. Im Jae-hwan looked at the customer and said that it was not difficult. The customer couldn't believe his own eyes that Lee Pil-gyu had lost to some very young guy. Im Jae-hwan said that Lee Pil-gyu was not a good hunter. Charyung turned around and said that just by seeing Lee Pil-gyu bragging about beating up his own colleague, you could immediately tell his low level. The guy explained that there are only 2 cases of good hunters resigning. Charyung said that former hunters are those who are no longer able to continue their work due to injuries or who die during a raid. Charyung pointed out that if the customer pays Lee Pil-gyu more than the lowest rate, then it is better to fire him. But if he is only chasing weight, then anyone can do that. Im Jae-hwan put his arm around the customer's shoulders and said that Charyung was exaggerating and that the dear customer should be understanding. Then the broker smiled and added that the fee for the service would be twice as high. The customer got angry and asked what kind of nonsense this was. Im Jae-hwan explained that the client was the one who started bullying him first. The broker said that nothing is done for free. The customer glanced sideways at Im Jae-hwan and replied that he understood and that's what they would do. Im Jae-hwan called out to Charyung. The broker asked him if he had heard of the celestial wasp, and Charyung choked on the water he was drinking. Charyung asked if he would have to fight her and remarked that it was too much. The sky wasp was the name of a monster that was known as the most dangerous monster not only on the Korean peninsula but throughout the world. The old Uido area, where the sky wasp nest is located, has become the most difficult area in Korea. Im Jae-hwan said that it was hard to deal with even one individual, so there were entire troops there, so there was no chance for the smuggler. The customer told Im Jae-hwan that there was a major raid yesterday that was not covered by the media. The state provided support to the military, and a team of 7 white-rank hunters was assembled. Charyung was surprised by this news. 7 hunters was a lot. Im Jae-hwan replied that all the Korean stars had gathered, and usually, as soon as a couple shows up, all the newspapers shout about it. Their goal was to destroy the sky wasps, but they failed. But they managed to hunt the queen. One of those 7 hunters took the royal jelly of the sky wasps, persuaded one of his men in the special forces, and secretly smuggled the item out. It was the first time Charyung had heard of royal jelly, and Im Jae-hwan explained that it was a nutrient that the wasps fed to the new queen. Charyung winced. He couldn't believe that a white-ranked hunter would decide to engage in smuggling for some nutrient. Im Jae-hwan said that the royal jelly of the sky wasps has appeared several times already, and the person who ate it was able to come back to life from an incurable state. Charyung was very impressed by the story he heard. All the nooks and crannies leading to the dungeons must be under strict control. This is the official position of the Hunters Association and the government. Im Jae-hwan claimed that in reality things were not like that at all. The broker stood in front of a large metal door. He touched that door and a glow of energy emanated from his hand. Warmly dressed, Charyung looked at the protective glasses in his hands. Im Jae-hwan said that he needs to be careful not to die, especially this time. Charyung remained thoughtful and did not react in any way. Im Jae-hwan noticed that the guy was thinking about something else and not answering. He asked if it was because of the royal jelly. He assumed that Charyung was haunted by the words about the potion that could revive the dead. Charyung turned away and replied that it didn't matter whether he cared or not. He still knew it was an exaggeration. He thought that even if this medicine, which has no equal, existed, it still would not be able to cure his father. Charyung knew that if there was any way, he would never lose hope. He swung open the heavy gate, and a blinding light burst through the resulting gap. Charyung found himself in a sunlit wasteland and peered into the distance. After the merger, various dungeons appeared all over the earth. There were several of the largest on the Korean peninsula. The first was where Jeju Island merged with the Hot Rock. Charyung adjusted his goggles, thinking about what lay ahead. The second large dungeon was where the Igara jungle merged with part of the Uido area of Seoul. It was a huge dungeon, in the center of which was the Yeouido district, as well as the Mapo, Yongsan, and Yongdepo districts. This dungeon had not been cleared yet. Many hunters said goodbye to life in it. One of the smuggler's men delivered the goods to the meeting place. Contact with him was lost when he arrived there. Most likely he was injured or in a dangerous situation. Im Jae-hwan believed that the man was injured by the heavenly wasps while he was running away. Charyung's task was to check the scene and bring the goods if there was any there. Im Jae-hwan told Charyung to stop thinking about weird things and focus on work. Charyung chuckled and asked if the broker thought he would run away with the trophy. Im Jae-hwan thoughtfully blew out a cigarette smoke from his mouth and said that Charyung was not a fool to do such a thing. Im Jae-hwan asked Charyung to be more careful than usual because royal jelly is a very expensive item, and not only humans are after it. Charyung used a strong rope to climb down the cliff. The guy landed in the middle of the forest between tall trees with dense crowns. The entire forest was filled with the scent of royal jelly. Charyung looked around and one detail caught his attention, causing him to frown. The monster's footprint he found was so huge that one could fall into it. The scent that hung in this forest would attract all sorts of monsters. Jin Se-ram from Hero High School was also here, and she was currently hiding behind the trunk of a tall tree. The girl was in the most terrible situation of her entire life. She thought that the second semester midterms would be easy, but something appeared in front of her. A monster that shouldn't have been in this place had appeared. And now Jin Se-ram was hiding from this giant. The girl pressed herself against the tree in horror, closing her eyes. Suddenly, she felt that something had changed in the forest. The exam was supposed to be very simple. It was necessary to collect as many coins as possible, which were hidden in different corners of the dungeon. It was a practical exam, and the difficulty level in the exam area was at its lowest, a hunting ground for beginners. Jin Se-ram looked at her palms. Taking advantage of her confusion, the giant monster came very close. The girl finally noticed the danger threatening her, and her eyes filled with horror. The monster was ready to attack. Jin Se-ram knew she had to escape, but it seemed impossible. And if there was a chance of success, it would be closer to a miracle. But despite this, Jin Se-ram decided to fight and took out her bow, which could fire 3 arrows at once. The monster she had to deal with was called the Titanium Ape. 3 arrows left the bowstring and quickly flew towards the target. They pierced the monster's palm, which it used to cover its face. Jin Se-ram thought that the monster's skin was taller than the armored cars. Her arrows did not cause any noticeable damage to it. The monster stood unharmed. No matter how much Jin Se-ram shot, its skin could not be penetrated. The girl did not give up and continued to fight. She flew into the air to hit the target from different sides. Jin Se-ram was completely focused on what she was doing. She managed to make arrows fly along a wide variety of trajectories. Thanks to this, the shots hit the monster's chest. None of the attacks had any effect on the monster, and he didn't even have to dodge or block the attacks. Looking at the monster's grinning face with its tongue hanging out, Jin Se-ram thought that she needed to get closer so that the monster would become a little less protected. Jin Se-ram was able to use magic on the tips of her arrows. She lit the arrows and prepared for another attack. The girl was a mage archer. She used a technique called fire explosion. The types of magic that could be imbued into arrows had no limits. For a complete victory, Jin Se-ram chose an explosion that soared above the treetops because the girl put maximum strength and power into it. She expected that such a blow would work on a monster with a 3-star danger level. Of course, this only applied to the situation when you hit the target exactly, and the girl was surprised to find that the titanium monkey had survived by climbing up the tree trunks. Jin Se-ram tried to understand what happened. The monster dodged or jumped up before the shot. The girl understood that she would not be able to repeat the attack a second time. Jin Se-ram froze in front of the monster, even though she needed to run. The monster rushed towards her first. He was very fast and almost caught up with her in a few steps. Jinsi Ram also ran, her eyes wide with horror. A bright flash hit the monster straight. The young man intervened in what was happening. It was Charyung. Jinsi Ram looked at him in amazement. Charyung looked at his victim, who had been hit in the chin and knocked to the ground. He thought the blow might not have been enough. Charyung reached into his pocket for a weapon and pulled out a pistol. He moved decisively into a new attack. Jinsi Ram couldn't believe that this man was charging at the monster, ready to fight him face to face. The monster was huge and raised its monstrous fist to strike. The stranger could die. Charyung shouted for the girl to close her eyes. Jinsi Ram watched what was happening in fear. Charyung's face twisted with tension. He practically flew up to the very face of the monster, which rose to its feet again. Charyung pointed his firearm at the monster. A blinding flash illuminated everything around. Jinsi Ram covered her eyes with her hands from the unbearable light. The titanium monkey was blinded and confused. Charyung thought he had just used his last charge. This tool was called the stun torch, a tool made from the scales of a glowing deep-sea fish. At one time, its disarm function won the love of many hunters, but the price was high. However, due to the inept use of its powerful properties, there began to be those who lost their sight. Charyung knew that using such weapons was currently considered illegal. Jinsi Ram carefully removed her hands from her face and opened her eyes. Charyung said that he had already helped, and from now on, everyone is responsible for themselves, and added that there were only a few seconds left. Charyung believed that no matter what happened inside the dungeon, he couldn't be seen by the hunters, so he didn't fight them or help them. Jae Hwan said that, to put it bluntly, they all looked like cockroaches. He asked Charyung if he knew that smugglers make good money. Charyung knew that if he climbed everywhere, he might get crushed one day. Charyung headed away. Jinsi Ram ran after him through the forest. It wasn't easy for the girl to catch up with the random savior. Soon she could only make out his figure as a small dot in the distance. Suddenly, the stranger disappeared, dissolving into the green forest gloom, although a moment ago he was ahead. He appeared suddenly, knocking Jinsi Ram to the ground and pinning her throat with his spiked pole, asking who she was. Jinsi Ram replied that she just wanted to thank him for saving her. Charyung didn't believe her and asked her if she thought he was an ignorant idiot. Jinsi Ram stated that this was not all she wanted to say. She knew that the man in front of her was a smuggler. Charyung was surprised to hear that the girl wanted to hire him for money. He looked at the girl and recognized the emblem of the School of Heroes on her clothes. The guy replied that he was not going to help her a third time. He let her go and was about to leave, throwing out at the end that he was not interested in knowing how crazy the offspring of the rich had gone at the School of Heroes. He looked over his shoulder and added that if the girl followed him, he would bury her. Jinsi Ram looked at his back, deep in thought. The reward for informing on a smuggler was 50 million won, and for a prisoner they gave about 450 million. Charyung was surprised to see that the girl did not leave him alone. The medallion he saw in front of him was called the Blood of Enkel. Jinsi Ram said that even if she captured 5 of his kind, that money would not be enough to buy such a thing. Jinsi Ram said that it was an advance payment, and if Charyung helped her pass the exam, she would pay the rest. Charyung replied that he thought she was just a rich girl, but now he's sure she's completely crazy. The girl asked if it was that important. She said that what was important was that now her interlocutor had a chance to completely change his life, and she showed him the medallion. Charyung stated that he knew this would happen. He told the girl that it was her own fault, even though he had no reason to kill her, and Jinsi Ram asked him what he was talking about. They stood opposite each other in a clearing in the forest, and Charyung suddenly looked up, saying that there were only a few seconds left, just like he had warned. The titanium ape jumped at them, and the monster's eyes were red. Jinsi Ram also turned to face the monster. The girl's eyes were wide open. Charyung threw his spear to her, and the girl caught it in surprise. The guy shouted that he didn't give her the gun so she could stand and watch. He reminded her how Jinsi Ram had already launched a fire blast at the monster. Now she needed to do the same. Charyung demanded that the girl put magic into the tip of the spear and throw it back. Jinsi Ram exclaimed that she had no more magic left. Charyung answered seriously that she had to solve this problem somehow. The titanium monkey was approaching, and it was not possible to hold out for long with bare hands. Jinsi Ram held the spear shaft and fiery energy swirled around her. The girl only had a quarter of her magic power left. With such low power, the titanium monkey could not be harmed. Jinsi Ram thought that while the smuggler was distracting the monster, she could escape from here alone. Charyung caught the magically charged spear that the girl threw to him. Jinsi Ram thought she must be going crazy. The spear in the smuggler's hand spun so fast that it looked like he was fighting with a wheel of fire. Charyung told the girl that this fire was less than a quarter of what he had seen before. He added that this would still be enough for him. With these words, Charyung rushed towards the titanium monkey. There are words that students at the School of Heroes hear all the time, that in a battle with a monster, it is not just destructive power that is important. The right moment for attack was of much greater importance. Also important was the feeling that allowed you to hit the target accurately. These were sensations and abilities that all hunters were supposed to have. The smuggler that Jin Se-ram met rushed forward furiously, joining the battle. He attacked successfully and the monster was engulfed in flames. The most successful of the blows hit the titanium monkey on the chin. Charyung's glasses were shattered into pieces by the intense battle. Jin Se-ram had her own complicated history, connected with the School of Heroes and not only with it. She was a cheerful child who ran around the yard with her friends. She saw her father's people coming for her. Jin Se-ram was waiting for the car that was sent for her. The girl said goodbye to her friends and said that she would see them tomorrow. Jin Se-ram knew that many people envied her. It was believed that this girl had everything she wanted. Jin Se-ram sat in the backseat of the car. She could really get her hands on almost anything that caught her eye. They drove past a tall, modern building. This was the main building of the fourth largest company in South Korea's business community, the Chinsen Group. The heir of this company married an elf, a representative of another world. Jin Se-ram was the child of this couple. Through the car window, she saw the hunters driving somewhere with weapons. She passionately wanted to become a huntress. It was her cherished dream. The fair-haired elf looked straight ahead and said outright that nothing would work. The girl was almost human. She had too little elven blood. Jin Se-ram, unable to catch her breath, fell to her knees on the sports field. The elf asked if the girl had not only not been stopped, but had even been encouraged to do this. Jin Sung-gyu, Jin Se-ram's father, said he did not encourage but supported the path his daughter chose. He noted that in order to become a hunter, it was not necessary to have the abilities of the elves, and his interlocutor did not object to this. The elf added that such abilities would not be superfluous for a person. Jin Se-ram was not much taller than the average teenager. The elf said that Jin Sung-gyu's daughter is not an ordinary person. Jin Sung-gyu wanted to understand what he meant. The elf meant that this girl would not give up easily. He smiled and said that in this way she was very similar to his sister. Humans could not compare to elves, even if they died in battle with a monster and then resurrected. If Jin Se-ram tries his best, he might be able to reach the average level. For an ordinary person, even this was recognition and almost praise. The elf believed that his niece had too much besides abilities from birth. Jin Se-ram was too rich, from too influential a family, the daughter of two famous parents. All this could instantly devalue all her efforts and make a laughingstock out of her. She was constantly under the spotlight of everyone's attention. This attitude could not be tolerated for long. Abilities didn't just fall out of the sky, but the random smuggler Jin Se-ram met in the forest did. The girl watched his fight with the monster in amazed delight. Charyung finished it and froze, clutching the spear in one hand. The monster lay on the ground, its neck ablaze with fire. Charyung slowly walked past the defeated enemy. Turning around, he noticed the lonely figure of Jin Se-ram at the edge of the clearing. "This can't be," the girl said, pointing at Charyung. "We are about the same age." Charyung thought he had broken the glasses that Im Jae-hwan had given him, saying that they were very expensive. Charyung was very surprised because such a thing could be bought for 5,000 won, but Im Jae-hwan did not agree. More than 4 types of magic were cast on the glasses. Now they were shattered into pieces. Charyung pressed his palm to his face and thought that he was just unlucky today. He didn't expect anyone to call out to him now, and looked at the girl through his fingers. Jin Se-ram asked if Charyung was a student at her school. He turned to her irritably and asked what kind of nonsense she was imagining. He extended his hand and demanded that the girl give him what she had promised. The girl gave him the medallion without further ado. Charyung looked at the artifact with suspicion, and thought irritably about the rich kids. Jin Se-ram said that Charyung probably needed money, and she understood that not only at school but at any institution that trains future hunters, the tuition is not small. Charyung confidently replied that he doesn't go to such places. The girl was surprised, but Charyung assured her that she had approached the wrong person. The guy said that he doesn't study at the hunter's school and hasn't even been anywhere near it. Jin Se-ram asked who taught him this fighting technique back then. Charyung crossed his arms over his chest and replied that no one taught him. He claimed to be self-taught. A shocked Jin Se-ram couldn't believe such nonsense. She saw these movements, this sense of time. It seemed to her that they were making fun of her, and she began to scream in indignation. An ID card flew into the girl's face. Jinsei Ram saw the student ID card of Donggang High School. It was a simple school with a liberal arts focus. The girl said that this couldn't be. Chaoryong pointed his spear at the girl and declared that no matter what might not be there, she also had to show him either her student ID or another document. Jinsei Ram showed her Hero High School student ID card. She was a freshman and the same age as Chaoryong. The guy wasn't going to give the document back and hid it in his pocket. Jinsei Ram asked why he needed it. Chaoryong replied that if she wanted to give him a job, he needed to take everything he could so that she couldn't change her mind. Besides, Chaoryong added, nothing was over yet, and ordered the girl to come closer. Jinsei Ram walked over with a look of surprise and confusion, and the smuggler put his hand on her shoulder, pulling her towards him. Chaoryong picked up his phone and was about to take a photo of them together so that, instead of a contract, he would have proof of their accomplice. He reminded the girl that accomplices of smugglers receive exactly the same punishment. At that moment, Jinsei Ram realized one thing. It is entirely possible that she has gotten involved with a man who is much more dangerous than she thought. However, it was too late to change anything, and the photo of the two smuggler friends against the backdrop of the destroyed monster had already taken its place in this stranger's phone. After this, Chaoryong suggested counting, and first asked the girl to tell him what exactly he should do. Jinsei Ram explained that they needed to collect coins for the Hero School quest. In 6 hours, it was necessary to collect coins that were hidden in different corners of the examination field. It was also necessary to find an information cube with a drawing of coins, with the help of which Jinsei Ram had to confirm her identity. Jinsei Ram showed her future companion one coin she had found and said that she only needed to find one more for her to pass the exam. According to her, the coin did not need to be looked for too far, and Chaoryong specified where exactly. This place was located where the Eugene Mall used to be. This information made an impression on Chaoryong, even causing him to look up from his phone. That's how it all happened, he said, and Jinsei Ram asked him what he meant. Chaoryong was sure that she had not stumbled upon the titanium monkey by accident. The guy himself was looking for something, and it was inside that shopping mall. He briefly explained to her the essence of his mission, and Jinsei Ram was horrified when she imagined the heavenly wasp. But Chaoryong reassured her that he was not looking for the wasp itself, but something like its honey. He said that this thing has a very strong scent that attracts monsters, and the titanium monkey appeared because it also followed the smell. Chaoryong asked if the girl should go there in person and if the coins were really only there, and Jinsei Ram thought deeply. The girl admitted that there were simply no more of them left in other places because they had been collected by other teams. Chaoryong understood what was going on. He had been interested from the very beginning in why this girl was walking around all alone. For him, the way things turned out was for the best. Chaoryong suggested that he take out the coin and leave safely. That was his job. Jinsei Ram named the price she was willing to pay to complete the task. The amount she named surprised Chaoryong, but the girl said that it was all the cash she could use right now. She looked at her phone screen and added that if that wasn't enough, she needed a little more time to get a larger sum. Chaoryong said that if there was a reason for extra work, then she would pay for the extra expenses. He asked Jinsei Ram if she still had magical powers. Chaoryong quickly disappeared into the forest. The girl thought he was incredibly fast. She had to work hard to keep up with him. Chaoryong thought as he ran that he was shocked by the amount offered and now regretted that he had not thought to ask for more. Jinsei Ram asked permission to ask her companion something. The girl wanted to know if this man had really never studied with anyone. Chaoryong deftly jumped over the obstacles and replied that it wasn't like he learned from anyone. He learned from them when he was a child. Suddenly, they noticed two monsters with huge claws. These were level 2 cluster raptors. Chaoryong told his new companion to get ready. He really had no training in hunter techniques anywhere. All his skill was mostly gained by risking his life and fighting with his bare hands. There was one exception. As a child, he watched his father's technique, which taught him 3 simple techniques. This was the science that Chaoryong was going to use now, rushing at the monsters. The first technique was called Needle. He mobilized everything the hunter had, speed, body weight, strength, and directed it at the enemy's weakest point. Chaoryong struck the cluster raptor with his spear, causing blood to spurt out from the monster's mouth. It seemed easy, but in reality it was not so simple. The feelings and abilities were the result of experience. The monster fell at Chaoryong's feet, and even among the high-ranking hunters, few could say that they had mastered such a technique on their own. Chaoryong mastered this technique to perfection. Jinsei Ram also dealt with her opponent, literally piercing him with arrows. The girl felt that what was happening was strange. Cluster raptors typically gather in groups of at least 5. Charyung said that it wasn't just Jinsei Ram who suffered damage because of the royal jelly. They stood at the place where the ruined forest turned into the ruined city. And Charyung said that soon all sorts of creatures would gather here. Charyung suggested that they rest for a while before moving on. Jinsei Ram asked if Charyung received any private lessons as a child. Charyung replied that there were no lessons, he just watched the training a few times. It was even harder to believe that you could just watch and learn a few techniques. Charyung asked why the girl was looking at him with such a puzzled expression. Jinsei Ram honestly admitted that her new acquaintance irritated her, but Charyung didn't understand why. The girl silently threw him a small object, which he deftly caught. He had an ampule of endurance elixir in his palm, and Charyung asked why the girl gave it to him. Jinsei Ram told him to drink this medicine because he was most likely not in the best condition right now either. Charyung said with a smile that if the girl gave him the ampule because he irritated her, then she could speak worse about him. The boy hid the elixir in his pocket, and Jinsei Ram asked if he wasn't going to drink it. Charyung said that he could sell the ampule profitably later. Jinsei Ram asked if the guy didn't know how much she cost. Charyung explained that by selling it on the black market, he could get about 1,000,000 won. Jinsei Ram thought that this guy was very strange. Charyung said that since the girl had already taken her dose of the medicine, there was no need to linger. It was time to move on. He walked forward and glanced sideways at his companion, thinking that the children of rich parents were very strange. They reached the former shopping mall, and Charyung said that Jinsei Ram probably knows, but he wants to confirm some details again. Charyung reminded them that their goal was not hunting. They had to get what each of them needed safely and get out of here. He told me to keep my cool and follow his instructions, no matter what monster was inside. Charyung said that even if Jinsei Ram had studied a lot at her school, he knew the science of survival better, so the girl would have to trust him. Jinsei Ram looked down and agreed with the guy. She couldn't understand why she had such a strange feeling right now. She spent 6 months at the School of Heroes, during which she was unable to achieve recognition and settle in there. The girl was going to go into the danger zone with someone for the first time. The old building they were about to enter had long since cracked, and vines had covered the facade. It was a large shopping mall with many dark, half-empty floors. The partners froze on the threshold in extreme surprise. "What is this?" Jinsei Ram asked fearfully. Charyung replied that he didn't know because he was also seeing something like this for the first time. The room in front of them was covered in blood, and body parts of torn monsters lay everywhere. Charyung thought that man was a much braver creature than he thought himself to be. As long as he prepared himself, he could face any situation. When it comes to problems, they can arise when what is happening goes beyond what is expected. Jinsei Ram, looking at the corpses, thought that these were all the monsters that lived in this zone, and they were quite dangerous even for professional hunters. The girl thought with horror about what awaited them inside. Charyung told his companion not to relax. He said that there was something dangerous inside and asked if the girl didn't know about it. Charyung added that Jinsei Ram might be surprised because it's worse here than she imagined. But that doesn't change anything. Something moved in the depths of the room, attracting attention. Charyung grabbed the spear and pointed it at the approaching creature. This monster was called the Chopping Rib, and its danger level was quite high. Charyung was ready to enter this fight. An extremely long tongue burst out of the monster's grinning mouth and almost reached Charyung. The guy deftly dodged, blocking the attack with his spear. He watched in amazement as the creature's tongue twirled around the shaft. The monster snatched the weapon from Charyung's hands and pulled it towards him. Charyung and the monster looked at each other from opposite ends of the Great Hall. Charyung attacked the monster, again using the techniques he knew, and kicked the enemy's vulnerable spots. Jinsei Ram watched this fight from the sidelines. Having defeated the enemy, Charyung returned to his companion, and she admitted that at first she mistook the monster for one of the corpses, but it turned out to be so tenacious. Charyung objected that it wasn't a matter of survivability. Someone had deliberately left this monster alive to act as a warning to those who entered here. When the slashing rib is in danger, it lets out a terrible scream, alerting other monsters, and Jinsei Ram asked who could have left it here. "It's me," the unfamiliar voice answered, explaining that he couldn't continue to stay awake and wait for him. The young man stood on the top floor and, yawning, reported that there were more of these creatures than he thought, and as soon as he dealt with them, fatigue overcame him. Jinsei Ram asked if this man was a hunter. She noticed that the stranger said he was waiting. She asked if Charyung knew him. The stranger said that they were both too small to be smugglers. The school emblem on Jinsei Ram's clothes caught his attention. The stranger jumped down and asked if the girl was studying at the School of Heroes. Jinsei Ram replied that it was, and the stranger said that he was very sorry. Jin Si-ram was horrified to hear that she would have to die in such a place. Charyung asked why the girl was talking to him, since this man was not just an ordinary hunter, as she might have thought. He stated that it was a villain who was going to kill them and get the royal jelly. Charyung shouted that the stranger seemed to have no relation to his client and asked how he planned to deal with the consequences if he stole someone else's property. The stranger admitted that he didn't even know and would only worry about it if he was exposed. He said he was lucky. He accidentally overheard that his colleague was going to steal a precious thing. He originally planned to attack when Charyung was heading here, but he knew that things didn't always work out the way he wanted. Now he was sorry that he had not been able to complete the plan. He saw the monster run away in that direction, but he couldn't find it. There must be a shelter here where the treasure could be hidden. Charyung realized that the connection with the person in charge was not cut off because of the heavenly wasp's poison. This smiling, unfamiliar hunter was to blame for what happened. Charyung didn't have to fight him personally to understand one thing. The stranger took hold of the hilt of his sword. He said that Charyung's death was predetermined, but it could be done as painlessly as possible. In front of Charyung stood a real hunter, very different from the rabble he had met before. Charyung told Jin Si-ram to find her coin and get out of here as quickly as possible while he distracted the man. He explained that thanks to the stranger, the building was no longer dangerous, and Jin Si-ram asked what would happen to him then. Charyung noted that nothing would change if she stayed here. The stranger said that he heard everything and made the first lunge towards Charyung. Charyung shouted that Jin Si-ram should stop standing there and run away quickly. He added that he could only get his money if she stayed alive, and the girl started running. The stranger was surprised that she had actually left. He thought it wasn't the best choice. The chances of staying alive were higher as long as the boy and girl stuck together. The weapons crossed, creating sparks. Charyung said that the stranger was talking nonsense. To the hunter's surprise, they fought on equal terms. It even seemed to him that his opponent was calculating the trajectory of the sword. It was surprising to him. Charyung knocked Hunter down. A bright flash blinded everyone present. Charyung froze in a fighting stance, catching his breath. To his amazement, he heard a voice saying that he was a little surprised. The voice came from the dark figure. He said that he didn't think that he would have to use equipment as well, because he didn't take Charyung seriously due to his age. Now the hunter saw that his opponent was of a higher level than a professional, and he would have to work hard to remove that girl from the School of Heroes as well. A gold-rank hunter emerged from the darkness. Fully armored and looking like a monster himself, his name was Yang Do-gyun. Hwan was making himself instant noodles in his passageway under the displeased gaze of a bald customer. He offered to brew a glass for the client, but he angrily refused. Hwan noted that it was better to sit down because the fighter lying on the floor would not wake up anytime soon. The customer said that this big guy had pumped up his muscles for nothing, and he had paid him so much. The fighter claimed that he himself was a hunter and boasted a lot about his strength. Hwan said that he lost not because he was stupid, but because he deserved to lose. He thought it was a big mistake. Hunters shouldn't fight with people. This fighter was also wrong. He was trained for hunting and reconnaissance, not for fighting other hunters. He might have been able to deal with the monster, but it was no surprise that he was defeated by the smuggler. The customer said that he heard that the hunters were fighting among themselves. Hwan agreed that such cases do happen. The higher their level, the further things can go. Even comrades and colleagues who fight together, relying on each other, can stab each other in the back out of greed. The customer asked if they kill each other. Hwan said that no one can stop them from doing this, because anything can happen inside the dungeon. For example, you can say that a comrade was killed by a monster, and no alibi is even required. The higher the hunter's level, the more they train in anticipation of fighting each other. But Lee Pil-gyu wasn't a hunter of that level. Hwan said that bragging about beating up a co-worker sounds cute. If Pil-gyu was caught doing this, then the incident must have happened outside the dungeon. There must have been some minor squabble over equipment. When hunters go hunting, they take armor and weapons with them. Hwan said that if he had at least this friend could fight. Charyung was preparing to fight the hunter in the dungeon, and the smuggler only had a spear against him. For hunters, it is their equipment that makes up half of their combat power. Charyung didn't miss his attack. He hit the enemy exactly where he should have, but it wasn't enough for the gold-rank hunter's armor. Yang Do-gyun said that there was no need to think so much about all sorts of nonsense and attacked. The hunter's sword crossed with Charyung's spear. It wasn't easy to withstand the force with which the hunter pressed. Yang Do-gyun stated that it was simply impolite to him and to his own life. Yang Do-gyun threw Charyung back with a well-aimed blow. The smuggler had no intention of giving up. He looked straight into the eyes of his opponent. The spear in his hands drew various figures. "What's wrong with you?" asked Yang Do-kyun. "Come on, show me again what you can do." The shadow jacket made from Yang Do-kyun's armor provided physical strength support through the user's blood, and also formed a cover to protect against blows. Yang Do-kyun used the berserker style. Charyung thought that it couldn't be that he didn't have any weak points. But if you respond to the hunter's attacks poorly, he will kill Charyung. Charyung was focused on what he was doing. He tried to dodge every blow from the hunter. Yang Do-kyun triumphantly drove his opponent into a corner. The hunter noted that Charyung had lasted quite a long time. Charyung asked if maybe today was a special day. He took off the jacket that was damaged by Yang Do-kyun's attack and said that it was his favorite piece of clothing. Charyung noticed that there was nothing special about his opponent. He admitted that he was scared at first because of the hunter's aura, but it's worth considering that Charyung himself was an ordinary schoolboy who came with nothing. He looked at Yang Do-kyun and said that he only relied on his equipment, and he himself would like to have such armor. Charyung knew very well that his opponent was in a hurry. After all, he needed to destroy Charyung and then catch up with Se-ram so that she would forever remain silent about what she saw. Charyung was stalling for time as best he could. Yang Do-kyun was in an increasingly urgent hurry. Charyung moved quickly. There was also a second unique technique. Charyung also mastered it in childhood, spying on his father. It was impossible to perform it with only Charyung's powers. He used the power of his opponent's attacks against him to deliver a powerful blow. He himself did not fully master this technique. It was called Zib and was truly destructive for the enemy. Charyung wiped the blood from his lips and said that he never even imagined that he would have to use this technique against a person. He didn't think that there would be a professional hunter who would attack him so thoughtlessly. Charyung suggested that the enemy surrender, because no matter what he did now, he would not win. Yang Do-kyun grabbed a specially shaped knife and didn't respond to Charyung with anything other than curses. The hunter plunged the knife into his own chest. Charyung looked at what was happening with bewilderment. Yang Do-kyun declared that he would definitely destroy him. The fifth floor of the shopping center was dark and empty. Jin-soo-ram looked ahead with a puzzled expression. In front of her was the Hero School ID cube she was looking for. Jin-soo-ram walked up to him and logged in. The girl found what she was looking for. Now she needed to go back. Jin-soo-ram thought sadly about everything that had happened. She remembered how Charyung told her to run away quickly, and she started running because he said he could only get his money if she stayed alive. Jin-soo-ram tried to think that nothing would change even if she went back there. She remembered the hunter's confident face, his professional sword. She convinced herself that Charyung wouldn't fight without an escape plan in mind. Jin-soo-ram stood alone in the middle of the corridor. It was many years ago. Somewhere far from the dungeons, one guy roughly grabbed another by the collar. The second one had blood on his face and looked beaten, and he said that he would not behave like that in front of the one he called Do-kyun anymore. Yang Do-kyun considered himself a genius. Since childhood, everything came easy to him, and he knew it. His fight with another young man took place on a sports field, and a lot of onlookers gathered around. Yang Do-kyun was very talented. Adults recognized this. His peers admired him. But there was one thing that he couldn't do for a very long time. He had heard that you could only get in there through connections, that they looked more at money than at ability, and it seemed to him that this was true. If it were a contest of skill and ability, he certainly wouldn't have lost. Yang Do-kyun passed the test of overcoming difficulties, breaking all records and taking first place. All the other students had difficulty passing this test. But Yang Do-kyun was special. He was the talk of the hallways. He was in first place with an insurmountable lead in points. He was on a completely different level than everyone else. When he finally finished school, the director congratulated him. He shook his hand and predicted that Yang Do-kyun would become a first-class hunter, wishing him to never become arrogant and move forward. Yang Do-kyun thought of this man as a failure who was sent out to teach school children. He was going to look down on this man from above, from where ordinary people could not reach. In the dungeons, he had to face something that made him afraid. He saw a man standing with a spear over a fallen monster and saying that he was told that there was an emergency here. He ran as fast as he could, and there was nothing like that here. Yang Do-kyun understood that this man had single-handedly destroyed the monster that had just killed his entire team. Yang Do-kyun looked at the man as he approached him. He was well aware of the look directed at him in return. It was then that he first realized something he had never even thought about before. The words of that old man from the school were not advice, but consolation. Yang Do-kyun was not the chosen one. He was just one of the ordinary people, perhaps just a little better than others. Now, many years later, Yang Do-kyun finds himself face-to-face with an unusual opponent. The hunter's armor was made from a living bloodsucker monster that Do-jun allowed to absorb the blood that flowed to his heart. It was payment for him killing Cha Ryung. Cha Ryung wasn't so sure that this would happen. It sounded like a rather dangerous stunt. Yang Do-kyun himself took on the form of a monster and attacked the enemy. Cha Ryung noticed that the speed of his movements was not that fast. The monster that the hunter had become was approaching. The whip-like hand of darkness began to strike, which was very difficult to dodge. Cha Ryung couldn't block all the attacks aimed at him. Blood was running down his face. Yang Do-kyun said that Cha Ryung managed to block some of the blows. He had an extraordinary reaction speed. Hunter did not understand why this man was smuggling. Cha Ryung was surprised to hear this sudden praise. Regarding the smuggling, he replied that it did not concern Yang Do-kyun. Yang Do-kyun replied that, no matter what, he was grateful. Now Yang Do-kyun had the opportunity to trample someone like Cha Ryung. Cha Ryung gathered all his remaining strength and rushed at the enemy. Yang Do-kyun exclaimed that Cha Ryung was a good boy and suggested that he show more enthusiasm. Cha Ryung thought that the enemy wouldn't be able to keep attacking him forever. If a monster feeds on the blood of its host, it will eventually reach its limit. Cha Ryung needed to try to spend blood, then use the needle technique. The monster loomed over him, growling that he knew everything himself. Cha Ryung had time to think that it was too late. A flame struck the monster, illuminating the entire hall with a flash. Cha Ryung turned around in surprise to see his unexpected assistant. On the second floor stood Jin Se-ram, holding a bow in her hands, an arrow having just been fired from the string. Cha Ryung smiled and said that Jin Se-ram was indeed very naughty. Yang Do-kyun, who had turned into a monster, also saw the girl. Cha Ryung said it was impressive and delivered another accurate blow. Having returned to his previous form, Yang Do-kyun collapsed to the floor unconscious, and Jin Se-ram asked if he was dead. The girl came closer and leaned over the hunter. But Cha Ryung stated that there was no need to worry too much about him, because people like him do not live long. Cha Ryung explained to the girl that this man would not bother them much anymore. Otherwise, he would have to say goodbye to his career and reputation. Cha Ryung said that it could be considered that Jin Se-ram had repaid his debt, and the girl asked again what debt he meant. The guy reminded her that he saved her life and it happened more than once. The first time was when he intervened in a situation where Se-ram was attacked by a monster.